Welcome to our talk presenting some recent work emerging from our research center DECADE on content trading. So we're talking about buying and selling digital content in a B2B context. My name is Birgit Altrichter and I'm working on this research together with Professor Glenn Perry and Dr. Alicia Tuladar, and we're all based at the University of Surrey. I would like to start off by very briefly introducing DECADE. DECADE is a very, I would say, interdisciplinary research center. So it's a collaboration between the University of Surrey, the University of Edinburgh, and the Digital Catapult in London. But we also have over 30 business partners that work with us, and we look at different aspects of the decentralized digital economy. And we have experts from the business school, but we also have experts from law, we have experts from design informatics, cybersecurity, and so on, taking different perspectives on the decentralized digital economy. Now, our work is in particular exploring a challenge that emerged with the digitalization of content. So while the digitalization made content more easily to be distributed by content creators, at the same time, this ease of distribution created new challenges, as all of a sudden there were copyright infringements and challenges emerging with royalty payments, so that content creators did not get paid for their work. Our work is looking at the different challenges that emerge with that. But before we can do that, we need to look at who is actually involved in the process, who benefits from the exchanges in the business practice. And then we can take a closer look and explore the challenges and weaknesses in current business practice of content trading. And then further, in the next step, look at how blockchain technology and distributed ledger technology can potentially resolve some of the challenges that our work identifies. And we see very high expectations of blockchain technologies. So, for example, if we look at the business model, there were claims that blockchain technology can actually transform business models and make the processes faster, less expensive, with increased levels of automation. So, for example, by using smart contracts, which are codified agreements that allow a higher degree of automation, we would need fewer middle layers, so we could make the whole process in the business model more efficient by cutting out these middle layers. There were also claims from other perspectives, so that blockchain technology can create more transparent and more sustainable supply chains, and it could even help to work towards fulfilling the UN Sustainability Development Goals. So we see from all these different areas and perspectives that there are very high expectations that blockchain technology can actually help us to transform business models, to become more efficient, and work towards also this to resolving these greater challenges we face globally. At the same time, there are very few empirical case studies that look at specific use cases, how blockchain technology can be implemented and how it can actually resolve some of these challenges. So our research aims to fill this gap by exploring business models that underpin current business practice of B2B content trading, and we look in particular at the creative media economy. We are guided by two main research questions. So first, we look at transaction costs that emerge from the business challenges that we identify. And secondly, we look at how blockchain technology can potentially help to reduce some of these transaction costs, to overcome some of these challenges. Theoretically, we are drawing on business model literature. So a business model we can define, if we really take a very simplified definition of a business model, we can look at three areas that make up a business model. First, we have the proposition. So here we have a product or a service that is created, that is being offered to consumers or business partners in a B2B context. But we have to be aware that this is only a proposition. We then need to look also at the realization in use. So that is when the product or service is actually being used in context. And that's when the value is actually created. which then leads on to the capture of the worth. So that's how we create a sustainable business model, is if we have this proposition, the realization and use, and from this we try to capture worth in a sustainable manner, which then creates our business model. We draw on the business model canvas that was developed by Osterwald and Pigner, and I do not want to go into too much detail about the canvas, but it is in essence, it is a very practical tool that segments a business model in 9 areas. And we can see that what costs are deduced from different areas of the business model and what revenues emerge from other areas of the business model. We take the theoretical lens of transaction cost theory to guide our work further. So transaction costs can be defined as costs that emerge when one activity terminates and another begins. So we can compare it almost to a machine. If the machine runs very smoothly, we have very little transaction costs. If it runs not so smoothly, then more transaction costs are incurred in the process. Broadly, we can categorize transaction costs into 3 areas. So we have search and information costs, which are all leading up to identifying relevant business partners. We have bargaining costs, which are related to the negotiation stage. And we have policing and enforcement costs, which then ensure that agreements are met and that agreements are monitored in a way. More recent work also found that with increasing complexity, it becomes more costly and more difficult to actually codify such agreements and such transactions. So codifiability refers to how easy it is to write agreements into code. And we start seeing here that actually when there is a lot of complexity, it may become less efficient to have blockchain governance and to facilitate transactions through blockchain, for example, with smart contracts. We take a case study approach methodologically in our research. So we are drawing on different types of data collection methods and we look at different areas of content trading in B2B contexts. So we had quite a few interviewees from the music industry, but we also looked at news, we looked at film and movies, we looked at TV shows, so very different contexts. So we take a very modular approach in our research. We're drawing on discussions, in-depth interviews and workshops with industry experts working in the creative economy, and I've conducted 19 semi-structured interviews, whereas we'll use the business model canvas as a guide for our interviews. And I would also like to share some preliminary findings of our work. So we have categorized this, as you see in the first column, the business challenge, then the classification according to transaction cost theory, and we included a few exemplary interview quotes here. So one of the key challenges we have identified is related to inefficiencies in the process. So it is a very slow process, and it is also the different areas, the different processes are very siloed. They are not working very well with one another, and that is actually creating a lot of transaction costs currently. We also see complexity, in particular when it comes to license agreements and rights management. And this spans across the search information, the bargaining, and then also the policing and enforcement costs in transaction cost terminology. So in particular in the music industry, we have, but this actually applies to all contexts, we have different legislation in different countries. We have different interpretation of the legislation in different countries. In the particular case of the music industry, we have 13 different types of licenses, and they all need to be individually negotiated, as this quote shows. And there needs to be 100% agreement in order to receive payments. So it is a very complex and very fragmented process at the moment. And there is a lot of individual negotiation, which is, it seems to be done via the telephone at the moment. So it's a very manual process, very individualized process at the moment. We also see that there are challenges related to a lack of diverse content. And that's relating to search and information costs. The quotes that we see on here are referring to the context of online streaming platforms such as Netflix, for example, where we have very few individuals, and this interviewee described them as gatekeepers, who decide what type of content is being bought and then being shown and offered to consumers. We also see a business challenge related to metadata. Metadata is basically describing the digital content, who holds copyrights, and providing all this detailed information about that. And the problem with the digitalization is that this metadata was stripped away from the actual content. And it was not prioritized in a way that it was kind of the metadata was is kept somewhere in an Excel spreadsheet rather than really seeing this as the key of the business model, because this actually is the foundation for content creators to be paid. And if the metadata is inaccurate, or it is incomplete, or it is wrong and incorrect, then content creators cannot be paid and do not receive their royalty payments, which then really creates a business challenge for them. We also see challenges related to user-generated content and content created by small organizations or individual actors. This is a little bit related to the challenge around the lack of diversity, because currently there is no process in place how organizations such as broadcasters, for example, could utilize content produced by individuals. Also the copyright surrounding that is not very clear at the moment. So we're currently at this stage where we have identified the challenges, and then we move forward and try to explore how they also can be or cannot be resolved by blockchain technology. And with this, we aim to contribute, first of all, of course, to theory, as we apply the business model theory together with the transaction cost lens to a very timely research context, which leads to our next contribution, which is to the emerging literature body on blockchain technology with an empirical case study which is examining a specific use case. We also have many recommendations for practice, because we highlight potential limitations of blockchain implementation in practice and challenge to some extent how these claims and high expectations of blockchain technology, how some of these can actually be put in practice, and some of them may have suffer from certain limitations. Future work, if we look a bit beyond our study, could quantify the specific transaction costs that relate to the business challenges that we have identified in our study. It could also examine contexts and applications, and also their limitations. So we could also look at other contexts, so beyond the creative economy, and how blockchain technology could transform some areas of the business model, but may have some limitations in others. And we could also look at some of the paradoxical tensions that emerged during the interviews. So, for example, this ease of a global distribution, which happened through the digitalization of content, at the same time created challenges for content creators related to their copyrights. So, and during the interviews, a few such paradoxical tensions emerged. And this leads to the end of my presentation with the references, and I would like to thank you for your attention. Thank you.